and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy! Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast of relentless incantations with me, Ben Maddox, and the hand that rocks the cradle.
Yorgos Panagiotis.
Well, here we stand, Georgios.
We stand? Why do we stand? No, I'm not. I'm opposed to standing.
Well, look, I've been looking at your calf muscles, and they could do with a little tuning. So stand on your tippy toes a bit, and then you'll get nice calf muscles.
I think my calf muscles aren't the problem. My buttocks might be the problem. And I notice you staring at my buttocks, and I'm sorry, I'm taken.
Purely, love, for
educational
medical purposes.
Yes.
I'm thinking of having a butt graft, and I was looking at yours as maybe the model for what I was going to have on my butt plasticosis.
Yes, I always love that. The moment you fear that the punchline of a joke might be going nowhere, you just inject extra syllables into a word.
Look, Georgios, we're not here to deconstruct my comic technique. We're here to talk about serious stuff.
Yes. Butt grafting.
Butt grafting is very serious. It's an operation, Georgios. I've got to go under a general anaesthetic to have my bottom sculpted into the form of a Greek Adonis.
Yes. I don't know him, but yes.
Isn't that your middle name?
No, my middle name is Danger.
Are there lots of people called Adonis in Greece? Is it a popular name?
Not popular, but I have met a few, yeah.
Because I mean,
they don't look like it, but I have met them.
That is putting some pressure on a kid, isn't it? You know what I mean?
I mean, if you look at a bunch of names, it's putting a lot of pressure on kids. Like people are called Freedom or God's Gift, or I don't know.
Well, Benjamin translates from Hebrew into son of the right hand.
That's
couldn't have a more apt. Couldn't have a more apt name ever, Georgios.
All right. Thank you for tuning into the all boys all the time hour. We're talking about butts, masturbation. What's coming up next?
We're going to talk this week, Georgios, about legacy games.
All right. I thought about why women don't like us. I mean, that's
one woman seemingly adores you.
That's the trifecta of boys, right? Penis, butts, masturbation. Now it's 4. Penis, butts, masturbation, and women don't like us. Quadfecta, yeah. That's definitely your word.
But one woman obviously adores you, right?
I'm not going to put words into her mouth, but she does put up with me, and I think occasionally when I'm not a complete ass, which I try not to be, she likes me as much as I like her.
I mean, it's over a decade at this point, isn't it?
I think I've worn her down, you know what you're trying to say.
Couple of kids over a decade, I mean, that implies some sort of mutual affection, does it not?
Yes, it does.
I'm going to die alone, Georgios. Not only am I going to die alone...
Well, you have a right hand.
I'm going to die alone in a pool of my feces and urine as my internal organs
I don't want
gradually give up on me.
I don't want to shock you, but most people do.
Yeah, but I'm not going to have concerned people sat around my bed going, "Oh, don't die, Daddy."
You're going to have concerned people saying, "Oh, don't die, person who I don't know and creeped into my bedroom."
I'm going to have like Tory MPs going, "We don't want the state to pick up the tab for your funeral as you've died penniless with no family. Don't die." Until the budget, at least.
Yeah, when is that going to get fixed? 2032 or something?
What, the budget?
Yeah.
It's never going to get fixed, Georgios.
Uh-huh.
We live in a system where all of the resources gradually dribble up. I was going to say gradually dribble, that's a lie. They flood up, and then the rest of us, bird in nest-like, suckle from teats.
I feel like we've matured in 10 minutes from infantile boys to grumpy old men. What's next? Are we going to start complaining about, kids these days with a hippity-hoppity music?
I'm not one facet, Georgios. I'm many things.
Yes.
I'm many neuroses and frustrations boiled together in a stew of twat.
Yeah, I don't have a comeback for that. It's just too good, just too on point.
So, legacy games, Georgios. All right, so let's talk about... This seems to be a really big debate.
All right.
Whenever it comes up. People have a real hard time defining what a legacy game is. You, being the fount of all knowledge.
Yes, all knowledge that starts with F.
Give us a go.
Interestingly enough, Wikipedia provides a definition which I, of course, did not look up right now, so I can't quote it verbatim. But
there's something I really just
yeah.
sidebar. There's something I really fucking hate.
Yes.
When people start a debate on definition and they pull up, so the Webster's Dictionary says, and I'm having to go with the Americans here because that's the American dictionary. The Oxford Dictionary says, and then they pick apart that definition. Be bloody original. Come with your bloody definition.
But how is it helpful to define words on your own when you don't have a common ground to talk to about with other people?
Because we have both experienced legacy games, right?
Yes.
Then we have a common ground of our common experience of experiencing them.
Well, let's say a comparable ground. Yeah.
And we have a fertile ground for discussion because we have, I'm sure, facets of what we think it is meshing together and facets that we disagree on.
All right, fine. I can see that. Yeah. So let's not right now call it definition. Let's talk about how we understand the term legacy. And I'll give you my experience, what I think are the cornerstones of what makes a recognizable legacy game. And then we can talk about why they are not awful. So one thing that I think a legacy game definitely has to do is it has to change over multiple plays. Most non-legacy games are like a finite in one play. Basically, you start from a certain beginning state, you play them to the end, the games change from beginning to end, obviously, but at the end of the game, you can reset to the original state, and you can keep replaying from the same origin over and over again. In a legacy game, these change over time. Like, the first time you play is different from the fourth time you play it, it's different from the 18th time you play it. And it's not just difference in the attitudes of the players because they know the deck or they know percentages or whatever. It's because the game itself has changed in some way. So that, I think, is one aspect. The other aspect is that these changes, at least, I think they should be triggered by player choice. So I'm kind of moving towards what I think makes a good legacy game. I think it's possible that these changes aren't triggered by player choice, but just, you've played it 4 times, now do this. You played 8 times, now do that.
Well, I think the daddy of legacy games.
Yeah, we're not at granddaddy yet because they're not that old.
Exactly. The daddy of legacy games was just Pandemic Legacy Season 1.
No, that's Risk Legacy.
No, but I don't mean as in age, I mean as in status.
Ah, right, okay.
And I don't think that's arguable. The first unlock, and I'm going to say what it is, I'm not going to give it away, but the first unlock is not through player choice.
Oh, no.
It's just through something that will inevitably happen in the game.
I think I think you can have a balance there. I do think that if you remove player choice from triggering legacy style changes, that cheapens the game to a certain extent. It becomes less of a legacy style game and more of a game with expansions, so to speak. So we had changes over time. Player interaction should play a role. I think another point that is important, I think, is the distinction as to what changes. Does the game in any way change, or does your player character, your player position change? And I think Risk Legacy does that, in that certain changes in the game change the board itself. Pandemic Legacy does the same thing. Season 1 and Season 2, certain things on the board itself are changed in addition to your player character changing. Because you have games like Descent, you have Imperial Assault, where the change is not to the game itself, but to the character you're playing, which sort of moves it back to more or less traditional role-playing.
Now, we were discussing this last night, and because it wasn't contentious, we were just discussing it, but you've excluded what I think is the core of Legacy.
Right.
Which it was the core of Risk Legacy, which is the original Legacy game. It's the first Legacy game. And so you open Risk Legacy,
right,
and you look at it, and the first thing it says is nothing will be the same again. Something like that, okay?
That's true of everything.
I'm just saying what it said on the box, Georgios.
I'm just poking holes.
Poking holes?
Poking.
Oh, I wish I could say the same.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so one thing that you haven't mentioned, which I think is the core, which was the initial transgressive nature of legacy, because there is an element of transgression in it, is irreversibility. In that you perform certain actions. For example, the one that made everybody sort of laugh behind their hands and get hot under the collar, which is the tearing of cards.
Right, yeah.
And you destroy components. What that does is ensure the game can never be the same again. Once you go past this point, you can never go back. So if you want to compare, so people will say, oh, Descent is a legacy game. It's utterly fatuous, because it isn't. What it is a narrative progression game. But you can always reset. Descent. You can always go back to the first mission. Fortress, one of the 2F games, one of the fast-forward games, has this sort of progressive revealing of mechanics. But it's not a legacy game. You can always reset it. It's the same with Fabled Fruit. It has that idea too. I think the thing that makes it legacy, the reason it's called legacy, it's in there within the very genre title, is irreversibility. That once you go past this point, you can never go back.
Yeah, I'm not as convinced. I'm not saying I disagree with this. I'm just not as convinced of it as you are, in that I think there are a few proper legacy games that come now with packs that allow you to reset things.
Yeah, that's a different thing, though. We were talking about this last night as well. If you look at Charterstone with the recharge pack, or Gloomhaven, I think.
Yeah, it has a re-sticker pack or something.
That's a different thing, because what you're doing is you're just playing a different game. It's a different universe that you're inhabiting.
Yeah,
so you play through the one thing, and then you can reset it, but then you're resetting it.
Yeah.
But it's not the same game.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you that you have to make the distinction between, maybe it does come back to my distinction between player-driven changes and, automated changes. That if the changes that happen, if the reveals that happen are always the same, always at the same time, I think you have a narrative progression game. If at the end of the third session, you always get this special character. At the end of the eighth session, this other character always dies and you can't change it. It's just part of the fixed narrative of the game. I think this is less in line with the spirit of a legacy game.
But that's Pandemic Legacy, right? Certain events happen in certain months.
But not exclusively.
And the big world-changing events happen in certain months without getting spoilers.
No, but I think there are definitely player-driven choices that fundamentally change not
what happens, but who it happens to. Maybe I agree with you. In Pandemic Legacy,
it changes the game.
I'm thinking of Pandemic Legacy as an example. Yeah. But I think with the resetability is actually a step down. It's a reeling back of the legacy concept. So if you look at the first one, Risk Legacy, the whole idea of Risk Legacy was once you do this, you can never change. And then a number of legacy games came out. And then people were saying, but
I want to play games 400 times because that's what I always do with my collection.
Because that's what gamers do, right? They don't buy new games every bloody week.
No.
Play one game.
It's at least once a month.
And so there was this, you only play it once, which is not true.
Yeah.
I mean, you play it loads of times. I would guarantee most of the gamers I know played Pandemic Legacy 1 many more times than most of the games they claim to love in their collection, right? If you play a game if I play a game 15 times, that's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Especially over a condensed period of like a month. That's insanity, right?
Well, yeah, but that's unusual. I mean, I've heard a lot of, I'm now playing Pandemic Season 2 and we were quite, we had enough time to play Season 1 every other day. I now find myself sort of 4 or 5 days passing before we get time to sit down and play another game of Pandemic Season 2.
But regardless, I'm just saying this recharge idea, this reset idea, is just a softening. It's a stepping back due to audience annoyance at the fact.
Well, yeah, softening or, refining, either way. But no, I agree with you. I agree with you in so far that once you change something in a legacy game, you're stuck with that change. The option to reset it should be a conscious choice to go back to the beginning and not part of the regular way you play the game.
Right.
Yes.
And, that was the frisson, right? not only the narrative developing, but that hugely transgressive idea of destroying components was very attractive to people. When people would talk about legacy games, they would talk about that first moment when they tore a card. I've seen it happen playing Pandemic Legacy. Where, I mean, the thing is, we played Risk Legacy after I played Pandemic Legacy.
Right.
And Risk Legacy, all of us were just like, just tear it because this is shit, right? No, I remember the first time someone tore a card in Pandemic Legacy. There was that hesitation, that sort of glowing of the eyes, and this sort of, am I really going to do this? And then this sort of, when it was done, you know? And of course you get used to it. It's like that line out of True Romance, isn't it?
I don't quote True Romance.
You know, you feel bad after you kill the first person, but after the 20th, you just do it to see their expression change. Ripping cards becomes commonplace after that.
What a nice turn of phrase.
Thank you. It becomes commonplace after a while. You know, we got to tear this up. And so but yeah, I think irreversibility is crucial to the legacy experience for me.
Oh yeah, I can see that. But I can also see how this might be adjusted in the future. I don't think this is the part of legacy games that we're going to see emphasize in future legacy games. I think what we're going to see is this idea of exploring a game that you've bought over multiple plays.
The changes. This is what it's becoming. I mean, you can see the evolution happening now. We're in the intermediate stage. And I think in the future we will break off into different camps. And there will be irreversibility fundamentalists, and then there will be more progressive people. And I say, well, this isn't a legacy game. You can't call it a legacy game. You don't tear shit up and burn it. Whereas there were people who go, no, but you have this aspect. But I think there will always be a difference between the narrative form of the game, like Descent, and the legacy game. There is something inherently legacy. And at the moment, I think that big defining difference is irreversibility.
Yeah, I can see that. No. I think in the future, I could imagine, because one of the things I noticed about the legacy games I've played, which aren't that many when I think about it.
Well, there aren't that many, so...
That might be a reason. Is that this fusing of changes and narrative progression. I think this is where people jump off to see games like Descent as narrative games. Is that a well done legacy mode, a legacy game that I consider really making the most of the concept isn't necessarily the one that destroys things, but the one that changes things in a way that fits into these narrative breadcrumbs that the game lays out for you, that becomes a story in your head as you play.
Well, I think this is why Charterstone is so interesting within the genre.
Right.
Now, I'm only doing this based on having seen reviews and things like this, because I didn't pick it up in Essen. My pre-order is coming probably in about a week now. But
are we going to hear, you being very mad at the postman for not bringing you your Charterstone game next episode?
No, I'm good. I'm good with that. I'm not one of those. If it doesn't come, it doesn't come.
All right, excellent.
I'm one of those people with Kickstarters. I back it and I'm like, oh, I can't wait. And then I completely forget about it. And then I get a parcel a year later and go, what the hell was that?
I don't want this anymore.
But no, I think the thing, Charterstone, seemingly from what I can gather, is the first legacy game, I think, that doesn't primarily focus on narrative.
All right.
But focuses on the building of the game.
Right.
The changing of the game. The making it from one game into the same game, but different. I think he builds on the Tuscany idea.
Do you think that in order for a legacy game to have a narrative, you need to have sort of like text that you read out?
No, I don't. I don't. And I think anyone who's listened to this podcast for a while will think neither of us think that. We think narrative is something different. The best narrative in board games is a scaffolding on which we build our own stories. Of course.
Yeah, exactly. So because I'm thinking of these moments, because I had them in legacy games
but I think they have been to this point though, right?
Not necessarily, no. I
Pandemic Legacy is hugely story-driven in the sense of writing on cards that tell a story, right?
I think that's still part of the scaffolding, though. I think games have always been, and I'm hoping more designers will pick up on that. I think they are. Have always been story infused, but the story moments were not text that you read from a card. The story moments were decisions characters made within the context of the game that gained meaning because of what we've experienced so far.
But I think Pandemic Legacy isn't. I think it is also that, but I think it takes you through a story that has been pre-written and pre-planned.
Oh yeah, that is true, obviously. But I think even Pandemic Legacy specifically, and this has nothing to do with the story you're reading and more to do with the way the mechanics work, has these moments, and I've experienced a similar moment. I don't think it's a spoiler. It's similar when we played season 2, in that you see a decision before you and you know the risk, and the risk might be very, very, the risk might be that your character that you've, invested in might be removed from play. And you have to make this decision that feels meaningful, because you go, do I risk the survival of this character to achieve our objective or not? Even though the chances of this character getting out alive are very slim. But if we don't do this, we lose this game. And these decisions that are meaningful because of the way the rules work, they are sort of these narrative packages, these moments of these plot twists, these moments, these peaks that create the actual narrative at the game table. Well, and I think the best example of this, sorry, let me just finish this, has always been to me Battlestar Galactica. The decision to send one of the characters into the brig and then arguing for against this, it's this amazing fusion of interplayer dynamics and in-play decision-making. It perfectly maps onto one another and creates these very heightened moments, these allegedly immersive moments, these role-playing moments where you accuse somebody else of being a freaking toaster. And then, oh no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And I'm going to send you into the brig. And there's just these moments when they work, when they don't become rote and sort of worn out, are very, very dramatic. They're dramatic in a way that I think no other medium manages to do with that amount of personal involvement.
No, I agree. I mean, it's the USP of board games. When you have that situation, the game becomes almost incidental, and it's people arguing their virtue across a table, which is...
I know what you mean. Let me just quick sideline. I think it's essential, not incidental, but that's a topic for another day.
Yeah. But I think what Pandemic Legacy does, for instance, Pandemic Legacy feels to me much more like a computer game in the sense of you have a challenge that you have to overcome. Right. When you overcome that challenge, it unlocks a cutscene that fills you in on more of the story.
Yes, but I always felt that those parts of Pandemic Legacy Season 1 were, for the most part, dull. They were not engaging. They were not, and it has nothing to do with the writing, I think. I don't think if the writing had been better, these moments would have been more engaging. It's just, I didn't care what happened to the world because I was not that world. I cared about what happened to the characters and how they changed and how they made it through, and if they're going to still be around next turn.
Well, it's because we're myopic human beings, right? We evolved to grow up in communities of no more than 250. So if you ever look, if you have a macro thing where you're taking in the whole scope of the planet, it's distancing and it's hard to become emotionally connected. This is why great movies that deal with huge human events always have an anchor point, which is one person in the middle. Whether this be apocalypse situations, or if you look at Mad Max Fury Road, you have Furiosa. She's the center of that film. She is what anchors you to the greater thing. If you look at war movies, you'll always have The Dirty Dozen is a good example. You have a band of people that you root for within the greater macro
amazingly
idea.
Dark film.
And this is always the way. You always focus on the local rather than the global, because this is how we're structured as humans, right?
Maybe. Maybe. I just don't think this, I find the explanation far easier to say that the world in Pandemic Legacy isn't developed. There's it's just an abstraction of something I know exists, and it has nothing to do with my ability to empathize with the entire planet. It has to do with the fact that a board is a board, but these characters who I've made decision as or for is different than this board.
Well, I think part of the reason Pandemic itself as a game, not just the Legacy one,
right,
is so successful as a narrative device is because it says it's now. The world is now. So we don't have to fill you in with narrative devices because you can just take that all for granted. We know what we think about Washington. We know what we think about Baghdad. We know what we think about Shanghai, right? And so a lot of those things are filled in just simply by our own preconceptions because it's the modern world now.
I think I agree because I remember a moment from season 2 where there was a decision.
Hang on a second. Unique Klaxon. George just said he agreed with me.
Because I remember moments when we were playing season 2 where there was a decision about which two cities we should deal with first. One of them was London, the other one was Sao Paulo. I sided for Sao Paulo for game mechanic reasons. My girlfriend sided for London, partly for game mechanic reasons she explained afterwards, but also partly because she knows London. And Sao Paulo was just this place that she knows existed. And that's it. Oh, I'm just realizing that I seem to imply that my girlfriend is racist. There's a certain, following this point you made, there's a certain sense of identification with actual real life places you've been to.
And there's work that doesn't need to be done on the part of the creator.
Yeah.
Because all of that stuff is sort of filled in by our conception of those places anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's a very clever thing. So if you have there's so much more work if you develop a world independently. But this is why you have things like Tolkien. This is why you have things like the Forgotten Realms. I mean, actually, what they are analogues of our own world. So it's a shortcut, right?
Yeah, I agree. But I just realized another thing that I think would argue that there's another narrative. I don't want to call it trick because that sounds like cheating, but a narrative decision that's being made in season 1 and emphasized in season 2, which is character creation, which is something that's fairly unique to most board games and something that's usually part of role-playing games and maybe some computer games. The idea of your character token is not just the blue guy or the red girl or whatever. The character token has a name. It has an age. It has a job. And it even has, small spoiler, in season 2 it has a birthplace.
I mean, this is what's so clever about Pandemic, the iteration of Pandemic Legacy, is that you take a character and they are generic. Mm-hmm. They're named by their roles, essentially.
Yeah.
What is so clever is then they give that character to you and they say, give them a name, give them relationships, give them an identity. Mm-hmm. Take what you know about that picture you see of that character and map your conceptions onto that character, then own it.
Exactly. And this is the essential buy-in to what makes a narrative work. It's not, it's this fusion of you as a player creating this and to a certain extent reimagining yourself as this character that you're going to play now.
Well, it's the narrative idea, isn't it? It's not essentially what happens. It's who it happens to.
Right.
That makes you interested.
Exactly. And I think that the narrative beats in Pandemic at least, and I think in every legacy game that really, really works, is that things happen to characters and those characters are you as a player. They don't happen to your engine. They don't happen to the world at large. They happen to somebody you identify with, somebody who is you in a certain sense, making the way across this adventure.
So we'll move on then. What makes a good legacy game?
All these things we just talked about.
Why do they succeed though?
I think part of it is novelty. There's no question about it. There's like you said, the transgressive act of the first time destroying component. Obviously, this is something new. This is something exciting. Part of it, I think, is the fact that they do promise something that a lot of people kind of want from a board game, but are sort of fine with not getting.
I think we can both agree. I think you've said it previously. Is there are certain emotions board games kind of don't tap into?
Right, yeah.
They kind of don't tap into pathos and they don't tap into melancholy and sorrow. And though you get excitement, it's not a sort of empathetic human exhilaration at seeing a character achieve in the same way that you do in a computer game or in a movie. I think what certainly Pandemic Legacy does, and I think what other legacy games are attempting to do, is generate those kind of more, you're going to disagree with this, but I can't think of a better term.
No.
More humane emotions, more self-affirming emotions, right?
I'm not sure that pandemic is breaking that much new ground in that sense. I think self-affirmation.
I have felt things.
I think self-affirmation is very, very central to most board games.
No, but then I said it wrong. That's not what I mean.
All right.
I mean sort of human affirming.
Like affirming humanity.
Yeah, this understanding of sort of
empathy,
specific, grief,
right,
and shock, and fear, and sorrow, and all of those sorts of things. So there is an event that happens in Pandemic Season 1 at some point, and one of the guys, I'm trying to be as vague as possible now, one of the guys was genuine, when the people I was playing with was genuinely hurt when it happened.
Right, yeah.
And you could see them.
It's the identification, isn't it?
Yeah, their face just went, what?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And that's what, you're right, that's what people are missing in board games.
But I mean, it goes beyond that. I think we talked about this in the RPG show. The idea that RPGs allow you to delve into emotions that have to do with vulnerability. They have to do with pain, with painful memories, painful experiences, and the kind of cathartic way of sort of interacting with these emotions through this layer of fiction. And you're right. Board games, for the most part, don't do that. Board games are all about affirming the player in being successful. They're never about exploring the interior life of anything.
Though you disagree with me on this, I think there is a Skinner box aspect to board games.
Yeah, I disagree with you on that. Yes.
Anyway,
I think the interesting thing, because I'm thinking, is that part of it has to do with the gaming culture at your table. And it's not something I noticed with role-playing games a lot, especially when I switched when I went from the UK back to Germany. The tone at the table basically dictates what kind of emotions are acceptable in this circle of friends. Like one topic I love coming back to and lambasting you, or not you, but just people about, is that being hurt, upset, or frustrated at the way you're being treated at the game table shouldn't be cause for ridicule and dismissal.
For sure.
And so
it's contextual, but I think as a general rule, you're
exactly right. But I think that seems to suggest that there are certain emotional responses that we as gamers have grown accustomed to not accepting at the game table. If, for example, somebody is so hurt or touched that, they start crying, this is a complete breach of board game etiquette, if you want.
What's really interesting, though, with Pandemic
in a role-playing
Legacy,
game, you might be able to do that, though.
And I think in Pandemic Legacy, to some degree, you can. Because we are all familiar with acceptable realms to express emotion.
Well, yeah, you're British. I'm brought up in Germany, so any sign of emotion that's not negative is frowned upon.
Is weakness, yes. Yeah. But so films, and especially the older we get and the more nostalgic we become much more at home with crying at movies. So we just do. You see grown men talk about, I watched Boyhood by Richard Linklater, and I cried 3 fucking times in it.
Was it because it was so long?
No, just sidebar. Boyhood is one of the best films ever made.
I need to watch it. I have it on my shelf. I haven't seen it still.
But crying playing Agricola is different to crying playing Pandemic Legacy. Pandemic Legacy is closer socially to the experience of watching a movie than playing Agricola is. And so those kind of emotions are readily understandable. If someone cries playing Agricola, you're like, if someone cries with frustration playing Agricola, you're like, that's bizarre. And that's an uncomfortable indication of something else going on in a person's life.
See,
at least that's what we'll think.
Yes, I agree with that. I think, and that is not helping. I think that's an attitude. I think that we as gamers should reconsider, and maybe try to adjust to the fact. I mean, I agree with you that most games don't go that direction. I mean, Agricola is not designed to make you cry over the fact that you can't feed your family. Even though if you think about it, it's a freaking tragic event.
But the point is, when something becomes so socially ingrained that it becomes instinct, to overcome that is Herculean, right? To overcome instinct.
Greek, by the way.
Indeed. Yeah. From Thebes.
I guess so, yeah.
But it's Herculean to try and get over that sort of instinctive reaction. Whereas if you play Pandemic Legacy 1, and part of the reason it's such a successful game is those reactions are understandable because we've mapped them onto our reactions to narrative.
And also we have context. We have context that goes beyond the collection of points, that goes beyond I want to win because I want to win. Everyone understands that we are invested in these characters. Everyone understands that we invested. Yes, part of it is we're driven to sort of succeed, but we're invested in how we succeed. We're invested in what happens to the people, to us in inverted commas, as we strive to save the world.
And words like tragedy and injustice can then be applied to the game without this sense of huge pretension.
Of overreacting, nobody would see if somebody were to argue it was a huge tragedy that I couldn't feed my family in Agricola. It makes sense only if you don't know the game.
Yet if X happens to Y in Pandemic, you can put that word to it and it doesn't seem an absurdity.
Yeah, less so at least.
But also, you haven't experienced the roiling, skin-peeling hell that is Seafall.
Well, is it not good? I just ordered 15 copies.
Well, luckily you would have bought them at a heavily discounted price, so that's not the end of the world. But the point is, I think what's fundamental to a successful legacy game is we mustn't forget these aren't films. These aren't novels. These aren't poems. What they are games. And you need a fundamentally good game at its core for those other aspects to be successful.
I agree, yeah. I think the legacy element is something that can elevate a game, but it cannot replace the game.
Absolutely.
The legacy aspect can't be its own thing. You can't have a game where the only concept, the only game part of it is exploring the packages, unlocking the story.
Because fundamentally, when you're playing it, it's like goals in football. The opening of the packages and the revealing of new stuff is a minuscule part of the actual time spent with the game.
Right.
It's 10% at most, opening the boxes.
Yeah.
The rest of it, the other 90% is playing the game. Mm-hmm. And if playing the game is unsatisfactory, opening the boxes, as I think will be revealed later on, opening the boxes will be unsatisfactory.
So what you're saying is this is a legacy-style episode then? We are now unlocking reveals. We're hinting at reveals later in the episode.
From this point, you can't go forward.
Beck, you should go forward, because if you don't go forward, you won't hear what we're going to say.
I am a sexual being. You can't unhear that sentence. You can't unhear it,
but you can doubt
it. You want to.
You can doubt it.
So, okay, just to finish up then, where does Legacy go from here, and how do other games take aspects from the Legacy genre and improve themselves without becoming Legacy games themselves?
Narrative. I think, if anything, our discussion shows that, I mean, at least as far as I'm concerned, narrative is something that Legacy has enhanced within board gaming. It has allowed games to be seen through a lens of a narrative structure, of a narrative arc, not just, I mean, we've talked to designers who do speak of a narrative arc within the game itself, but this is, I mean, when we compare it to something like Legacy, you can sort of see it's a word that's borrowed to explain an arc that happens during the game, and a sort of a rise of tension, a rise of conflict and confrontation, but not necessarily emotional beats. Emotional beats, as they are, especially when they go beyond just, lucky you, you've achieved something.
A particularly narrow emotional palette.
Exactly. Everything that goes beyond that is something that Legacy games have hinted at can now exist, because with a Legacy game, you can expand the context within which actions take place. And the broader the context, obviously, it opens up ways of broadening investment, of broadening meaning, on how certain decisions you make suddenly have meaning, like whether a character will survive or not, or how a character will change throughout the game, or how the world around that character will change and thus affect the character as you play it. All these things can evoke emotions in you as a player, and they can be emotions that go beyond what we're used to in most board games.
Yeah, I don't want everything to become legacyized. I don't want board games to become a primarily narrative art form.
I do.
I enjoy games for being games. I enjoy that aspect that they fire off in my brain that doesn't get fired off by other forms of art. I think within board games, having games that are specifically narrative, that generate those emotions, are great. And I think they have a place. But I think if that dominates the whole thing, games will eventually stop being games. And I like the lack of emotionality sometimes. I like the fact that I'm not forced to empathize, and I like the fact that I'm being asked to conduct a purely engineering task or a problem-solving task, because they're also parts of us as human animals. And so my hope is that legacy games can become viable, interesting, can unlock aspects of the human experience that games kind of don't. But I hope that's just a facet. And I hope that your standard four-brain puzzle-solving aspect is still very strong and prevalent within gaming.
I don't. No, I think this is the direction board games need to go. They need to go in the direction where the emotional palette is broader, where games are about empathy, because gaming is about empathy. And I think the fact that, and I agree with you that a lot of these games do speak to this sort of engineering thrill, this idea of just, testing your skill at putting things together in an efficient way. Those are great, but I always felt that every game that only focuses on that is sort of limiting itself. It's a stumped version of what gaming is. It's always a simplified, what's the word I'm looking for? Weakened, impoverished version of the gaming experience, because the pure gaming experience to me is social, is empathetic, where the things that you just described that I appreciate as well, I want them to be the engine, but not the purpose of games. I want these puzzles, these challenges, these clever ways of doing things and of planning ahead, of tactical decisions and strategic considerations. I want those still to be the beating heart of games, but I want this heart to be planted in a body that evokes empathy, that evokes human connection, that makes us think about, not makes us think about, but makes us realize that we are here now with other people, and there's something good about this, something enjoyable about this, there's something celebratory about this. And this is what I want games to do. And if we can broaden the emotional palette of games by way of legacy games, by way of narrative, then yes, more, please, all the time and nothing else.
And on this point, we can agree to disagree.
No, we can't.
All right then, Georgios, here we are. Some more Patreon shoutouts. We're going to give those people the names
they deserve.
Right, Georgios, I'm going to start.
You do that, yeah.
We have Brad Narocki, and from now on, you are known as Sylvester Stallone.
Why?
Rocky, Georgios.
Oh, that's clever. All right, coming up next is Mr. Kurt Henson, who's obviously now going to be known as Bob.
And we have, last but certainly not least, and not even last.
No, not even close to last.
Meeple Pete, and from now on, you are known as Photobag 9000.
Ooh, that's nice.
He's Geek of the Week this week, Georgios. He's a celeb.
Well, not by the time this episode airs, no.
You shut your mouth.
See, that's how time works, you know? All right, and then we have Rico, who will now be known as Suave.
And we have host of Ludology Podcast, Gil Hover.
And the underappreciated I Know Something You Don't Know podcast that only 2 people listen to.
Hell of a joke.
Yeah, it's a great joke.
From now on, you should be known as the Networker.
Oh, that's clever, because, he made a game called Battle Merchants, didn't he?
Indeed.
That's so smart. And we have Heavy Cardboard.
Oh, I can feel the weight.
Yes. Yes, pretty much so. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's, I
don't remember his name, Georgios. I can't remember things.
It's this guy who does this podcast. Oh, man. Well, you're now known as the guy who does the podcast. Heavy Cardboard.
Yaron Davidson. From now on, you're known as Aaron Sweater.
You have to explain that joke to me.
Because it rhymes with Yaron.
But why sweater?
Because an Aaron sweater is a thing, Georgios.
Oh, it is?
Like a 70s sweater.
Oh, that's not bad. You think he's that old?
No, I just think his name rhymes.
Phil Campo, you are now going to be known as Rocky Horror.
And Chris, you are going to be known as the man with no surname.
Well, that basically works, yeah. And we have Dan Squires, the Knight.
And Daniel White,
Yeah, no racist jokes, please.
the Knight. But with an N, not with a K.
Oh, well explained. Well explained. Yeah. And then we have, thanks to the list I have here, that actually screwed up the font. So it's Moles?
Mervins? Mannins?
Menins? Maybe the entire syllable in there. Meinens M. Christensen. The Muslim?
And we have Minji Kim, and you shall be known as the same name as my sister.
Your name's... Wait, your sister?
My sister's called Kim.
Oh, I thought it was called... Not Minji.
Not Minji, no, Kim.
That's surprising. All right. Vasilis Liaskovitis.
It's lucky you got that one, George.
Yeah, it is.
Because that's a Greek name.
Yes, which is why he will now be known as the Macedonian.
Johannes Schmiedebach, and you will be known as the blacksmith.
Yeah, it works. It works.
Well, because Schmieder is the German word for smithy, right?
Yeah. I'll allow it. Then we have Lynn Davis, who will now be known as Jackson.
Don't get it. I'll have to ask you afterwards. Now we have Albert Lee, and you shall be known from this day forth as Batman's butler.
All right. Not Le Albert. That would have worked.
That would have been good. The Frenchie.
Yeah, the Frenchie.
No, I'm going to change it. You're not Batman's butler. You're the Frenchie.
The Frenchie, all right. And then we have Craig Taylor.
All over your boink.
Okay. Who will now be known as Garak.
And we have David Skoog, who will from now on be known as Skooger.
That sounds like an extra from Revenge of the Nerds.
It is.
Oh, it is. Excellent. And we have Lisa. And James Jepson. What a weird surname.
And James Jepson. What an odd surname.
So strange. You will now be known as the Emigrants.
And Patrick Brophy. You will be known as Crafty Bugger.
And I believe that is the end of our shoutouts for this episode. If you would like to get a personalized shoutout, why not look up patreon.com/perfectinformation, and we will be putting just as much effort in giving you an appropriate shoutout as we've given to all our backers so far.
And if you like our brand of absolutely fucking useless comedy,
well, it's not absolutely fucking useless. Mostly, I will grant you mostly.
Back the Patreon bit, and then you'll get a crap pun upon thy name,
which is the original name of one of Shakespeare's plays. You don't know which one.
Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild.
Oh, Georgios, well, thank you.
That's fine. What did I do?
Well, last week, if you remember,
I don't.
You scored a load of drugs because you were trying to stop me being a responsible adult and talking about my wedding plans.
Oh, yeah, I did that.
Yeah.
You do know I just gave you baking soda, right?
Well, they don't call me Mr. Placebo for nothing, Georgios.
Wait, who calls you Mr. Placebo?
I call me Mr. Placebo after last weekend.
So you refer to yourself as a they.
I've got multi-personalities, Georgios.
Clearly.
There's the happy Ben. Hello there, Georgie. There's the angry Ben. Oh, Georgios. There's the melancholy Ben. Oh, Georgios. There's the amped up on baking soda, going home and chewing the legs off his sofa Ben. Georgios, the wood tastes good. Well, safe to say, we had a bit of an argument. It's all right now.
Is it about the sofa?
Yeah, well, I chewed the bloody legs off the sofa, Georgios, in a drug-fueled craze.
Baking soda fuel, but yes.
Well, who's to say, Georgios, there isn't an active psychotropic ingredient in baking soda?
Science.
Are you a chemist?
No, but scientists, some of them are.
Name me a scientist you're mates with.
Bob, scientist, chemistry.
All right, fair enough. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, he is.
He drinks a little too much, especially when he's in here, Georgios.
Yes, but finally, he didn't start drinking alcohol until...
What was his name again?
Bob, scientist, chemistry.
Oh, right. Good, well done.
Yeah. Well, you don't think he's a real person?
No, I know he's a real person.
There
I
you
met
go.
him. I've spoken to him. Bob, scientist, chemistry.
There you go.
He's all right, too.
Yeah, he is.
Big beard.
I'm
Wonder
trying
how
to get him to cut it.
You wonder how he navigates those Petri dishes and test tubes with such a protuberance coming out of his face, don't you,
I think
Georgios?
the same way that Alan Moore shaves his chest.
That's right. But anyway, safe to say,
Yeah.
we had a bit of a frosty week.
Okay.
I had to repair the sofa,
Yeah, that makes sense.
but we're back on track, Georgios, and you'll be happy to know
I don't think so.
we've chosen a venue, Georgios.
That's
Chosen a venue.
great. Well, what venue?
It's a mystical fantasy castle, Georgios, and we're gonna have a themed wedding. Dogs.
Dogs.
We want all. You're going to come, I assume, to the wedding.
At or with?
Now, all of the people have got to dress up as a breed of dog, Georgios.
Okay. Wait.
Are there any Greek dogs, Georgios? Any Greek breeds that you can dress up as?
Are we? Wait. I'm starting to think that you're talking about the Metropole in Schöneberg here in Berlin, where there's a very strong what do you call it? Non-mainstream nightlife scene.
Is this
and
a way
I do
to-
believe there's a annual convention of
Pups.
yes, people dressing up as dogs. Is that where you're going to hold?
I did see a pup convention,
Yeah.
and I decided I'd look great in a PVC dog outfit, Georgios. Real skin tight, Georgios. Real accentuating the areas that don't require accentuation, if you know what I mean.
I don't think that those are areas that will benefit from accentuation.
Oh, they will when I stick a absolute collection of socks down the front of my PVC pup outfit, Georgios.
Yeah, that might work.
Anyway, so, just Greek breeds? Are you going to come dressed as a Planonochus?
Probably not. Partly because I don't know what that is.
It's a breed of Greek dog that
Obviously.
I didn't just make up, Georgios. Go on the Googles, check her out.
Right.
So, what was the question from last week's guild,
I
Georgios?
believe the question was, will you please deliver me from this? The question was, what does the board game community give you?
So,
Other than nightmares about Ben dressing up as a pup.
we whiz to our board game correspondent across the English Channel, Georgios, in sunny Huddersfield, Mike Poole, better known as Miscellaneous Hip. What does he say?
He says, he was kind enough to make us a bullet point list, so I don't have to read out entire sentences, instead just, bullet points. He lists the following.
Okay, so you're going to list it,
Yes.
and then I'm going to say whether it did it for me too.
Make genuine friendships.
Does that mean constructing them? Making your own friends out of wood?
No, more the community helped you make genuine friendship. The community provided these things for you.
So provided a wooden man to play with?
I'm going to count that as a no.
That's no.
Make pleasant acquaintances.
Again, constructing them? Is he a carpenter? Mike, are you a carpenter?
Are you son of a carpenter, maybe?
Oh my god. When was the last time you went water skiing and the boat stopped and you carried on water skiing?
Yeah,
Mike.
tell us, yeah.
Yeah, I made some pleasant acquaintances.
Would others agree?
They would agree that they made pleasant acquaintances. They probably wouldn't include me in that list.
I see. Met people who I'm quite content to play a game with, but not really talk with much after.
Yep, loads of those, Georgios.
Yeah,
A plethora. Probably the majority, Georgios.
Oh, you made the majority. And finally, met some who I'd rather not play a game at all with and would generally avoid all contact, if at all possible, without being a complete douchebag about it.
You see, that's where you're wrong. Be a complete douchebag about it. It's very liberating. If someone's a dickhead, go, "Excuse me, my friend, but you're a monstrous dickhead. Get out of my sight, prithee." And you feel great about it, Georgios. You feel great.
Did you memorize this line because you had heard it so often, or...?
It's called spontaneity, Georgios. It comes out of the cerebella, through my eye cavities, down past the nosy, and out through the mouth.
See, the art lies in using a long pause. It is called spontaneity. See?
That was beautiful, Georgios.
Thank you. So what do you think? Would you agree that this is something that a lot of people can boast that the board game community has given to them?
I think probably most people would boast that it's given them that.
Right.
What about you?
As in, I would not boast, and I'm not entirely sure.
I was just using that as a verb, but...
I know. I'm not entirely sure I would credit the board game community for it. It's not the community so much as the community gave me a framework, gave me a arena, a battleground? Playground. Haha, playground.
Believe me, Georgios, they're battlegrounds. Those toddlers can be brutal, Georgios.
I know. I mean, once you start kicking off the sandcastles and when you're 38, there's no going back. No, I think they provide a playground to form connections in a way that was, to me at least, easier than in other circumstances. I find it easier to strike up a conversation and, interact socially with people within the board game community because of the implied shared interest than I am with random hard-looking person at the bus stop.
Isn't that then the board game community giving you that, providing that? Is that just not pedantic?
Yes, it is.
Good. So we move on to Barry Dublé.
Barry the Doubled. Is he drunk all the time?
Always drunk.
Yeah.
But you see on his profile he's sporting a rather lovely Perfect Information micro badge, and if you wish to have one, you can just come on the guild and ask me, and I'll give you the geek gold.
There's literally a thread on that, yeah.
So what does he say?
Oh, he's very artistic and very poetic about it. A sense of belonging, a purpose, and friends. Unfortunately, a vast majority of those friends are farther away than I'd like. I have met so many great and interesting people that I'd like to hang out with that's a difficult sentence for me. So many great and interesting people that I would like to hang out with on a regular basis. It really needs a comma there. But at this time, it is not possible. Maybe in the future, yes. Life is a weird creature. I never thought I would be living in France, and I bet Yodros and Ben never thought that their lives would take them to Germany. Funny about that, it kind of did.
You were born here, weren't you?
Yes, I kind of expected to spend sizable amount of my life in Germany.
And now you're common law married to a German lady, aren't you?
I am, yes. Or she's common law married to a Greek guy.
Well, I mean, it goes both ways. It's just you're in the room, so I'm using you as a reference point.
I see.
She's not in the room.
No.
Does she listen to the podcast?
I hope not. I don't know.
Yeah, really? I know she doesn't. You wouldn't be together if she did.
No. I think my sense of humor doesn't exactly match up to our shared sense of humor.
Very nice way of putting it. So again, does it give you a sense of belonging? I think a purpose is interesting. What does he mean by a purpose?
Creating board game media content, I'm going to guess.
I assume that's what it is. But could if you're not a board game media person, could gaming give you a purpose?
Purpose is a very, what's the word?
Vague.
No, a very
malleable
word you put on a high shelf. Maybe.
Okay. Grandiloquent.
Maybe. I think what it does do is, again, continuing the shoddy metaphor from earlier, it gives you an arena to interact socially, to connect with people. And I think this is something that is essential to life, I guess. A way to sort of interact with people, to form connections with people, to relationships with people. And I think if you want to dedicate yourself, if you want to spend more time of your life connecting with people, then I can see something like a social endeavor like board gaming, regular board gaming, might help you to do that. It just as well might help you to, if you're maybe part of a football club or a fan club of some sort, or any kind of organized activity that deals with a number of people, like a sports club or something.
I mean, could a reason to leave the house be considered a purpose?
That's quite literally how most people define purpose, yeah?
Right. So, I mean, yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting that he said a purpose, and I think he is talking about his work within the industry. But really, it can offer you that, a reason to invite people round, or a reason to go round to other people.
Exactly. I think it's, we're running the risk of becoming very, touchy-feely here. But I do think the board gaming, because of it being a social beast in nature, can give you an outlet to, reach out.
I mean, I went to Tony Boydell's 50th birthday party in England
All right.
last weekend, and I wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for board games.
Yeah, so there you have it. Your purpose has been resolved. You can now leave board gaming behind.
So, what does Marlene Thompson Tick-a-Toy mean? Say.
You settled on say now.
I did settle on say.
It's better.
I said the wrong verb first, George. And then I settled on say, and I wanted to improve, but brainy don't worky work.
I noticed, yeah. So, she starts off saying, BGG gives me a place to look up rules questions and find out about new games or expansions for games I already have. Yeah, I agree with that.
So do you use BGG as a reference tool or as a community tool?
Reference tool almost exclusively.
Okay.
I think the exception being the guild, obviously. Yeah, just the guild, really. I used to... one of my earliest bad experiences on BGG was me asking a question on the Chaos in the Old World forums and getting such a condescending, awful reply that I just thought, sod this.
Right.
I have no interest in interacting with any of you guys. The guild, luckily, has become a separate island. Like, I guess most forums on BGG are separate islands. And I like engaging with people there.
My interactions with BGG is for reference, of course.
Yeah.
But also a sort of passive community thing. So I read people's blogs and I read what people write on the guild. I think the thing with the guild has always been for me that I don't want my viewpoints to dominate the conversation on the guild. If someone addresses me directly, then cool, I'll reply.
Right.
But I kind of want it to be a community for everyone, and only if I really feel it necessary do I chip in. Mostly BGG is passive for me.
Yeah. I agree. I would rather people talk about me than with me.
Right, absolutely.
I can see that. I occasionally tried reading blogs regularly on Board Game Geek, but some of that didn't stick. Occasionally look at Tony's blog, because he's kind enough to mention either you or me at some point. And, I'm nothing if not narcissistic. And but other than that, yeah, reference tool is basically the predominant use of Board Game Geek for me, and it's helpful. It's really, really great for that.
So she goes on to say,
public board game meetups are a way to find other people who are also interested in board games and might be cool to play with on a regular basis. My success rate on this is like 10%, but that's still a few people, I guess. And yeah, I agree with that. I might have talked about this last episode, but there used to be a time when I would go to public meetups or other groups just, to
recruit.
To recruit, yeah.
Groom
basically.
is the word, Georgios.
That has awful connotations. But yeah, to recruit new players, to find new people who might be interested in joining, and occasionally coming over to my place to play board games. And I still do this on occasion, but I'm not that, not motivated, but I'm not that driven to do that anymore. But I guess it's time again, because my regular gaming group is not so much growing stale as, real life factors are coming in. Jobs get more challenging, family time gets more demanding. It's natural. So I am looking to fill a few, to sort of have a bigger pool of people.
Public meetups for me are really the most utilitarian part of my gaming life.
Right, yeah.
I want to play a game. I need people to play it.
Right, yeah.
So I arrange it at the public meetup. Really, by who plays with me, it doesn't matter as long as I'm there to play the game. And there are and exactly what you do. Then from there I cherry pick people who I want to invite round to play games. I'm doing this today, for instance. And so yeah, I think public board game meetups are great from a utilitarian aspect, but that sort of all of that warm and slushy, touchy-feely stuff you're not going to get from them. It's about ships that pass in the night.
Yeah. Sounds kind of almost tragic, to be honest.
No, it's fine. I think as long as you don't lack that in other areas of your life, having something that's purely there for you to indulge your hobby is cool, I think. And simple and uncomplicated.
And then she mentions there's the Shut Up and Sit Down community, which is incredible. I've been playing regularly with a few locals from the forums and the perfect board game buddies. And I have to say that is probably the best way to make use of the online community that we can
For
make.
sure.
Funnily enough, friend of the show, and as we found out recently, part of now my gaming group is somebody who I met by way of the Shut Up and Sit Down forum. I think if this can happen, if people find common interests or common what's what I'm looking for, sensibilities, shared sensibilities by way of a say podcast that broadcasts these sensibilities, then that's perfect. I mean, this is if anybody from our listeners ends up playing with other people from our listeners because they both ended up listening to our show, I think I would be very, very proud of that.
I mean, apart from making millions, which of course is
my actual reason for doing any of this.
Exactly. I mean, that's gotta be the bit that
top 5
makes you feel the proudest, right?
Yeah.
That you're facilitating. I said facilitating. That's not a word, George.
No, it's a very Freudian slip.
You're facilitating a community, and you're allowing people not only of similar interests but similar characters and to get together and enjoy what you're trying to push. And I think that's really something to be exceptionally proud of.
So what you're saying is next year at Essen, we should find a way to sit down with people who are also going to be at Essen, who are listening to the show, and actually play a game.
Don't be stupid, George.
Last year, we tried it this year, it didn't happen. We're going to try next year.
I don't want to play games with these people. They're the hoi polloi, Georgios. We're the talent here. We should be sat in the VIP section with the Camparis and soda and the cucumber sticks.
Like this year, where we were basically stuck in front of the ale stand and just had random people pass by, and we just stood there drinking beer and talking smack.
And not enough people brought me free booze.
That's always true, isn't it?
All right then, Georgios. Well, I repaired the sofa.
Did you vomit up the legs?
I had to, Georgios. It was a pretty rough sticking them back together thing. But I thought I did a reasonable job. It's a bit wonky. If you sit on it, you know, the one end tends to shoot up into the air.
I assume the smell is awful.
Depends if your nose works, doesn't it?
So Janine's nose doesn't work then? That explains so much.
I just wonder, and now I've put it together, Georgios. She hasn't been in the living room for the last week, and I've worked out why.
She's sick?
Of me, probably.
Makes sense, yeah.
But we're going to go and check out the venue this week, Georgios. We're very excited. And
don't dress up as a pup when you go there.
Why not?
It will just, raise expectations. And imagine the date is how far away?
Oh, we haven't got a date yet.
That's even better. So what you're basically saying is you're going to squeeze into a suit now, and as the ravages of time, whatever it is that you call your physical form.
I prefer to call them the gentle massages and improvements of time, Georgios.
The expense.
Maturation is the word I would use.
The expense is how I would call it. And you're going to feel very, very awful trying to squeeze into that outfit again half a year, 2 years from now.
Well, anyway, Georgios, I can see the excitement and anticipation in your eyes, and I know you can't wait till next time when I report back on all the venue info.
No, I'm just trying not to laugh.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
Sorry.
I'm Nick Mariner, and this is the Boardgame Professor. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's good to be back. The first thing you'll probably notice is that my voice is even more gravelly and nasally this episode. I think I'm actually still suffering from a little bit of con-crud. I went to BGG Con last weekend, and then about midweek came down with pretty ferocious cold that I'm still trying to get over. Which is funny because it sort of fits into the topic for today. But public service announcement, if you're going to a con, just something to think about. Wash your fucking hands when you go to the bathroom. We're all touching the same stuff. And your little germy digits, I think somebody's got me sick. I'm not feeling 100%. It's funny that's how I'm feeling, because the thing I wanted to talk about and didn't get a chance to yet, so I'm going to save it, is how much I love the game Pandemic Iberia, and that it is the superior version of Pandemic. But I'm going to save that for later. What I'd like to talk about, the concept of community that Ben and Georgios talked about in last episode, and I thought, because I just went to BGG Con, I've been really thinking about this concept of community and what my own field of cultural studies has to say about it. Before I do that, though, I did go to BGG-Con. I wanted to do what I did last year and just shout out a couple games that I really liked. Clans of Caledonia, for me, was absolutely the game of the con. Terrific game. We've got our Games of the Year episode coming up, and that you might actually be hearing me talk about that one again. Montana is worth trying, the new Rudiger Dorn game. It's got a spinner in it, like it's a game of snakes and ladders or something like that. I am surprised at how much I enjoyed a game with a spinner in it. I walked away from the table thoroughly satisfied for what I thought would be kind of silly. And the other game that I loved, and I think I'm going to pick a copy of it soon, is the second edition of London, Martin Wallace's London. It's so pretty in this new production, and I enjoyed our play of it very much. A couple games not good. Alien Artifacts, we need to stop talking about that game. I did not enjoy that one. And then Friedman Freeze's new fast forward game, Fortress, we actually ended up stopping in the middle of that game, saying, you know what, we're good. Which never happens to me in a Friedman Freeze game. So there were some hits and there were some misses worth talking about. But, okay. Last episode, Ben and George, us talked a lot about this board gaming community and whether or not community is a good word for it. And this happens to be a concept that I used heavily in my own dissertation when I was at the University of Tennessee. And so I have some ideas about it, especially coming off of the con, that I wanted to share. So I'm not actually going to talk specifically about a board game this time, but I'd like to delve into the topic they brought up with a little bit of academic background, like I've been doing. On the surface, this hobby that we have, I think you could make a pretty decent argument that there's a community aspect in it, and that we're all coming together under a shared identity, a shared interest. And in particular, the internet is doing some really interesting things to expand that community. I didn't know when I first got into this hobby, deep into this hobby several years ago. I sort of knew the basic stuff, but the internet is where I found my people, Twitter in particular. I started seeing games I'd never played before, trying games I'd never played before. I started meeting people that I would not have otherwise known. And now to the point where I feel like people that I only know from the internet and talk to when I see them in person at a thing like a con, I genuinely feel a friendship with. Maybe not like, the old expression, like your best friend, a good friend helps you move, your best friend helps you move a body. I don't know if I know anybody well enough from the internet that I would consider them like within my inner circle. But I interacted with people and I talked to people at this con that I was genuinely excited to see. I saw Gil Hova, I saw Paul Grogan, both of those guys. I was so happy to see both of you. My new friend Albert, who listens to this show and reached out and we played a few games together. These are people that I will look forward to seeing next year. And so there is a sense of belonging that comes with this hobby as a community. And that's one of the central concepts of community, is that sense of belonging. Bell Hooks has a book called Belonging, where she talks about the concept of community as a structure of where you fit in, and how important it is to find a place to fit in. And I think that the board game community offers that in particular, by virtue of the fact that we all have something in common, and the thing we have in common is board games. I met people. I was sitting at the hotel bar on the very last day of the con. I just overheard these people talking about having tried some game, and I just leaned in, and then I ended up having a half-hour conversation with two complete strangers, purely over the fact that we all have a common interest. And that happens with other shared interests like sports. Like you're at a bar, I see somebody in Dallas wearing a Packers shirt. I'm going to lean in and I'm going to talk to them about the Green Bay Packers, because this is not like the safest place in the world to be a Packers fan. But I lived in Chicago, so these Cowboys fans, they don't even know what it's like to inflict torture on a Packers fan. Sports references, always a hit on a board game podcast. And in the first half of the 20th century, you saw a lot of work coming out of Chicago in particular, sociologists and philosophers who were advocating for the concept of community as a positive good. In my own field of education in particular, John Dewey is a standout here. John Dewey wrote an essay called The School as a Social Center. You don't need to remember that, but when I ran into Gil Hova at the con, he mentioned that I don't cite myself very often on this show. So there's a citation for you. Parentheses, comma, Dewey 39 or whatever. In that essay, Dewey's whole concept was that community is a system of sustaining relationships for the benefit of the whole. That education is a community concept. It's a dialectic concept. It's administered through exchange as opposed to just sort of rote memorization. But also that the school is a centerpiece of the social community in the way that, like, the only thing comparable would be like a church. And so the Chicago school of thinking in the first half of the 20th century advocated the idea of community as a structure of benefit for everyone. But cultural studies and a lot of scholars since the Chicago school have argued that the only real consistent marker of community is the loss of community. With urbanization and as people sort of balkanized, that we've all retreated into our own private sectors and we don't actually know one another. Like, I was just in central Illinois and southern Illinois this week for the holiday. And, my mom lives in a small town of about 600-700 people maybe, and they all know one another and rely on one another because they have to. It's useful to know your neighbor. But I live in an apartment complex with about 100 people, and I could tell you the names of maybe 3 of them because I live in a big city. Like, that's sort of what we're talking about in the sense of the loss of community. But in particular, what I want to talk about in terms of board games is the dual function that community as an academic concept plays out in our little circle here, in our hobby. In one sense, this hobby has provided a community that works in the exact reverse of what I just described. Thanks to, in particular, I would say probably the internet. That we all come together at these major events like cons, but we also get together in groups in our own private cities, in our towns and whatever, our game shops, our friendly local game stores, in an attempt to find places where we fit in. And it is an attempt to fit in across an identity, which in this case the identity is gamer, or board gamer in particular. That fits the sort of Hook's definition of community as belonging. We fit in. When I first moved to Dallas, I didn't know anybody, except for my kids. And so I threw up a thing on meetup.com, and that's how I found my game group. And now that they're some of my friends in town. They are part of my Dallas community. And we all belong to the greater community of board gamers. And at no point do I want to minimize how important that is. I mean, it genuinely did for me personally pull me out of a terrific funk when I moved here, because I didn't actually want to move to Dallas, Texas. But I moved here to be closer to my kids. And, for a while I was in a miasma of resentment towards this place, and finding a board game group was a significant step out of that rut. And certainly I would imagine if most people share their stories, that they are something similar to that. So the community as belonging concept is important here. However, cultural studies as a field doesn't ever praise anything without a sense of critique. Because cultural studies isn't the study of culture. Cultural studies is the study of power and how culture implements dynamics of power. And one of the central uses of communities in a cultural studies analysis is community for the sake of survival. For instance, in my own dissertation, I interviewed a bunch of guys who went to schools at segregated schools back in the 50s and 60s, during the era of Jim Crow segregation in the American South. And most of them used the word community. It was one of the first words out of their mouth when I asked them to talk about their experience in a school. But most of them talked about it in terms of, like, this is how we got by. We had no choice. We were forced into a neighborhood all by ourselves. We couldn't go anywhere else safely in town, so we all relied on one another for the sake of survival. I don't think that's what we're doing in the board game community. Maybe we're turning to it for that same sense that I talked about. Like this is what I need. I need this to feel like I fit in and feel like I've got something to do. But it's really not as pressing of a matter as, say, for instance, like if I leave my neighborhood, I'm going to get lynched, or something to that effect. And so we tend to talk about community and cultural studies under that idea that the people who embrace and require community the most require it for the sake of surviving against oppression. But more importantly, one of the most important factors of community membership, according to some of the cultural studies analyses, is a democratic ownership. That all voices within the community have an equal opportunity to participate and to guide how we function as a group. And I think really this is probably the point where board gaming breaks down as a community, ceases to function as a community in its own self-regulation. On the surface, this is an incredibly democratic hobby. Anybody who wants in gets in, right? Anybody who wants to come to the con gets to come to the con. Now, that requires your ability to purchase a ticket for $100. That requires your ability to travel all the way to Dallas, Texas, or Indianapolis, or Essen, Germany, or wherever. But there's lots of other ways to participate in the community. You don't have to go to cons. But the last episode that I was on here, we talked about the sort of fierce protection some men in particular are imposing on this hobby of against ideas of diversity, right? That there is a groundswell of speaking back against the women in our hobby, or anybody in the hobby who's trying to make sure that this is as inclusive an environment as possible. If this was truly a community, we would have something that approximated a more universal embracing of ideas like that. That the people who spoke up to be included wouldn't feel such hostility from various sectors, right? Like, for instance, like I just said, the Jim Crow South, black Southerners didn't have a portion of the population saying, like, well, maybe you all should just get a job and work harder and be better. Like, for the most part, hey, it sure would be nice not to be killed by white people was a fairly universal concept. That doesn't mean that that difference of opinion immediately eliminates the idea of belonging to a community. However, I would argue that until we reach a moment in which that sort of violent rejection of diversity is considered so fringe that you're unlikely to even see it spoken aloud in a public forum, it's hard to fully embrace the idea of board gaming as a community as opposed to, say, something like a shared interest or a hobby, right? That's what Kurt Vonnegut calls that what's the word? A granfalloon. Here I go getting into Kurt Vonnegut again. Y'all read Cat's Cradle. Read Cat's Cradle. Cat's Cradle is one of the greatest books ever written. And in that book, he has the idea of the cuirass, that there are certain things that unite everyone against a single identity. And those are fundamental to your actual being. But a lot of times we mistake things for being those linking qualities that actually have nothing to do with anything. So he calls those granfalloons. Like the example he gives in the book is Hoosier, being an Indiana Hoosier. If you're from Indiana, you must be related somehow. And that's nonsensical. I use the example of like sports fans. Like I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan through and through. But sometimes I see a St. Louis Cardinals fan doing something that is just appalling. And on one hand, like I feel like I need to take responsibility for that because that person's also a Cardinals fan. But on the other hand, us liking the same sports team has nothing to do with the fact that we have anything in common. So, while I think that board gaming has a great deal to offer in terms of being a community, and again, that sense of belonging and membership, And it's invaluable to most of us, myself included, for our own, survival in the grind of daily life. Cultural studies gives us the tools to critique how community works, how exclusion from community works. I think to make an analysis that board gaming as a hobby has work to do if we want to consider ourselves a fully democratic community for the sake of belonging and survival and protection. I don't think we're there. I do not. It is still way too acceptable to say some just atrociously stupid bullshit against women in the hobby, against representation in the hobby, before that this could be a place that's completely safe. I think it's probably better than it was, but we still got a long way to go until people fully come to the hobby to fit in, as opposed to fit in despite resistance from the hobby itself. We have yet to meet a fully functioning definition of community. I think we're there. I think we're getting close to being there. And it's exciting to watch, but we've still got work to do. This goes right back to what I was talking about with all of the trolls from a couple episodes ago. Like there is still work to do, but it's work worth doing, and I look forward to working on all of it with you. Okay, that's it for me this time. Thank you for bearing with my extra sultry and intoxicating flu voice that I'm talking through, but it's good to be back. I'll see you all in the next episode. I'm Nick Mariner, on Twitter at The Good Mariner. Thanks for listening.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative.
It's this week's review.
In a world where time is of the essence.
Y'all mean to tell me that I can't do squad till that damn saying runs through that damn saying timers?
A motley crew of pirates will reclaim their ship with a Spanish armada hot on their tails.
Hot damn, the Spanish armada hot on our tails.
They will have to work together to set the sail.
Oh, shoot. Why'd you have to go block that spot again, Shannon?
Steer the ship.
Now I have to go repair the hull again.
And host the cannons.
Now I have to go repair the hull again.
Without getting in each other's way.
It ain't right, I tell you. It ain't right.
Adventure awaits on the open seas.
Come on, stop getting in my way.
In this 10-part series of action-packed camaraderie.
Now who's gonna go climb out that mast now? I done did it last time, and I ain't going up there again.
And sudden outbursts of quiet.
Y'all busy, I reckon. I'm just gonna sit here and twiddle my thumbs till somebody goes up there.
And seriously dead calm.
Like I said, I got nothing to do all day till the sun goes down and the moon comes up.
Take a sip of the pirate life from tiny cups of adrenaline in A Tale of Pirates.
Shit.
Rated PG-13.
Yeah, skip to the end.
It's the one-sentence review.
A Tale of Pirates is a pedalo rather than a man of war, a pleasant punt down the Serpentine rather than a raucous sea adventure, and ultimately is too pleasant by far.
The presentation is exciting, the concept intriguing, the app integration well executed, but when faced with a complete package, A Tale of Pirates never quite manages to keep my interest for an entire turn.
Georgios? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
Okay, so for me and you, I think
Yes?
the elephant is, coming in And
You love this metaphor, don't
half
you?
of it is sort of short shorts
Right.
and like sort of knee socks, and the other half is in a business suit, and it can't decide whether it wants to go back to school or to the desk after its lunch break.
Yes. Okay.
So the question is this a game worth playing by adults? Or should it just be confined to the kids' shelf of the game shop?
That is not well, it's difficult. I mean, the box itself says 10 and up.
Which blows my mind, by the way, but I'll get into that in a minute.
No, I think it makes sense. I think it's reasonably... The game itself is not complex, but the things you have to do are noticeably more complicated than most kids' games for kids younger than 10. I mean, I've played a few games with my son now.
Oh, but my daughter, George, was playing Agricola at the age of 4.
Course. Yeah, of course. I mean, I've literally met parents like that.
I don't have a daughter, by the way, George.
I caught myself occasionally falling into the trap myself. I mean, it's easy to fall into. I mean, and when you realize, oh no, I'm assuming my kid is a cut above the rest because it's my kid, you should probably pull back. Anyway, my point is that, yes, I do think, I mean, you have to be fairly, what's the word? Dexterous? No, fairly...
Dexterous, yeah.
Yeah, very dexterous to place these send timers into these holes. They're not overly large. You occasionally get stuck when you try to pull them out. You need to be able to put them in carefully and pull them out carefully. You need to apply these individual game components, place them in the right place. It does take a certain amount of dexterity to do that. And I think most 5 or 6 or 7-year-olds might struggle with that, especially if they are excited, as the timer would undoubtedly make you. You get more excited, more tense. This is the kind of game, just playing it, not the decisions you make, just, what you need to do. You need to be kind of in control of all your appendages.
Okay, I mean, it clearly shows you have children and I don't, because that didn't come into my thought process at all.
Right.
But you're right, absolutely. I mean, there is a dexterous element to it. You don't need, it's not juggling or anything, but
no.
You need to be able to make sure you don't knock the boat over every time you stick something in the hole, right? But, I mean, what about the gameplay? Does this offer decisions that adults can find rewarding and challenging, or is this just, elementary level gameplay that could be exciting for kids and not for people who are older?
Yes and no. I think with a lot of cooperative games, the core mechanic itself, in the sense of the mechanic that you keep using over and over again, the decisions you keep making over and over again, tends to be fairly simple. I mean, in Pandemic, it's collect 5 cards. There's not a complex decision to make, but how you get
the way you arrive there,
exactly how you get there. Yeah, exactly. In a game I was quite enamored with in Essen, I brought it home with me, Mountains of Madness. The core mechanic, collect cards to beat a certain number, is very, very simple, but what makes it complicated is how you get there. I think the core mechanic in A Tale of Pirates is reasonably simple. Put send timer into hole, wait till send runs through, and then do what it says. The problem I see is that the individual actions are graspable, but they don't seem to coalesce into a bigger coherent challenge. It's just do this to do that, and do A to do B, or do A to do B to do C, and that's it. And then that's the entirety of the mission.
I mean, it seemed to me that there was a lot of chrome in this game. There's sand timers, there's a sexy ship, there's an app that makes, cool noises.
It's a good app. It's a good app. It's, I looked into it and it was well thought out. I mean, there were tiny, literally minuscule details that I think could use some tweaking, like the sound effect that's supposed to alarm you that something is happening, that a random event has occurred, is a little bit too... It doesn't stand out enough. It gets lost in the shuffle if you're arguing, if you're talking about things.
And all of that's fine. And all of that is great. But
the app is very good.
It struck me as a movie where the set dressing's lovely and the lens on the camera's great and the music's fine, but there's just no story there. The decisions I make, I think I could imagine children having a good time with all of that stuff and the elementary level decisions, but I did not find them in any way to have any import or any interest. And I think 10 plus, I think you're getting past 13 years old. You're not finding this game interesting. I think it's solidly a kid's game for me.
Yeah, I think it's the activity of playing the game, just the activity of putting the sand timers in, waiting for them to run out, and then doing what you want. That in itself is the main appeal. And I do think that outside of kids, a lot of people are not satisfied with that. The activity of just doing the action is not interesting enough. And as you said, everything that goes beyond that, everything that goes into decision making, tactical planning, just wasn't enough meat for us there. But to be fair, we're a grumpy old man and not 10 years old.
No, and that's the thing. I'm not using that as an excuse. I just don't think grumpy old men or average intelligent teenagers, I think, would find this a one-trick pony that doesn't gallop particularly quickly very soon into playing it.
So, what did you think of my interactive, candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
So, I'm a sucker for all of the sort of new things. Mm-hmm. When Legacy came along, I loved them. When microgames came along, I played a load of them. I like to feel like I'm experiencing revolutions as they happen. Mm-hmm. And this game fits into that in the sense that it's a narrative game that has legacy aspects in that you open packages and you receive new information. And when I arrived...
And new game elements.
And new game elements. So when I arrived at yours to play this, and I saw the papercraft ship, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
And you turned on the app, which is jaunty. And it has the character of a kid's game, but I thought, this might be really fun, if nothing else. If not satisfying, at least fun. I was anticipating something valuable, experience-wise. And it became to me very clear, very, very quickly, that I was destined to have a deeply unsatisfactory experience. How did you feel about after the setup and after you see that initial chrome and excitement and supposed innovation? How did it then settle with you?
I think I was a little underwhelmed as well at first. I thought that, especially the first chapter you play is fairly basic. It's a tutorial in a sense, in that you get used to using the individual action spaces on the ship and realize, if I do this, I can use the effects of this action space, like the lookout or the crow's nest. If you use this card, I can look at any other cards on the board, and that will maybe help us to avoid running into rocks, or that will help us find the ships chasing after us so we can turn around and shoot at them instead. I think it did a passable job. I mean, not passable, it seems to me. No, it did absolutely fine job. You can't demand much more from an opening chapter to introduce the game to you. The basic mechanics, everything was intuitive, it made sense, you got into it quickly, but already in the first chapter, you realize that a very, very odd choice was made to put the resolution of your action at the end of the sand running through the sand timer, which leads to this moment that was repeated when we played it again and again and again. As soon as you do the first action, just as you're about to start, you just started the app, the music just went up, the timer started, you do your action, and everyone then waits.
And actually what happened was, in our experience of this, and this is one of the few games that we've reviewed that our entire plays, and we played this, 6 or 7 times.
I think more than that.
Where we played it all together.
Right.
And what happened in our experience is actually, and this is a real-time game, you have to bear in mind, we started talking about what we were going to record in the show, what we've done this week, other games we've played, politics and all of this. And this is a real-time game that enables you to completely disengage from the game and talk about your life. There's something wrong with that, right?
I think it's a very strange decision because it must have come up in playtesting. It must have come up immediately as soon as everybody decides to take an action at the same time. You're locked out of doing anything.
The first decision is inherently that, right? Because you go, okay, it's start. You go there, you go there, you go there. Great. Place.
Wait.
Anyone want a cup of tea?
Exactly. I think, and it surprises me that nothing was done to fill in this gaming gap. Nothing was done. Nothing in the game asks you to do anything while you wait, which is fine, but you don't have, I didn't want to make this comparison, but it's on my mind all the time, not least of all because just now this week, 2 video reviews went up of this. I was playing Kitchen Rush. I loved Kitchen Rush. I was amazed by this. And I played this and it reverses this. Basically, you place it, you do your action, and then you wait. But what this does is the waiting is reduced. You get what you want to do. And then you're waiting, you're biting your fingernails to move on to the next step.
Okay, if you were to choose one adjective to describe a real-time game, what adjective would you choose?
Either tense or busy.
Right, that's exactly. Tense was the word I was thinking of. Are you ever tense in this game?
Only when the send time is about to run out. Not the send time, when the time limit of the app is about to run out. When the app starts blinking red, that's the only time I felt a little bit of tension. Do I get to finish what I wanted to do?
And then you have this idea that they had that you get to do your one last action afterwards.
Right.
Which I don't think is a great idea either, because those last actions are then the tension of that sand running through to, if we get this one last action, is then removed.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't feel any tension. Now, I've played a few real-time games, and the one I'm thinking of now is Dice Duel, which doesn't have a timer. It's sort of, it is in the same way Captain Sonar is. It's done by the other players and their abilities. And you're always tense in that. You're always constantly hoping that they don't get to their goal beforehand. And I'm sure Escape Curse from the Temple has this idea of tension. This is a real-time game. And a real-time game that firstly allows you to chat about other stuff and secondly doesn't provide any tension makes me think, why have it real-time then? Is it just not a huge gimmick?
I think the activity is really central to the whole game. I think if you, in a certain sense, the activity of play is central to every game. If it becomes about something other than play, I feel the game loses something. But I think it's very apparent in the Tale of Pirates that the activity is supposed to carry the entire game. And I don't think it's interesting enough, it's involving enough, and it's challenging enough to do that. The game structure outside of using the send timer just isn't tight, solid, or otherwise engaging enough to ask you to pay attention, which is what we did. You
can't base a game on a component, and I have that feeling that the overriding sort of idea was sand timers are cool, and it wasn't developed from there.
Possibly. I think, again, the comparison that I want to avoid, but it's pressing, is Kitchen Rush, which, again, I think is definitely based on the send timer idea, but everything in this game feeds into making you stress out, keeping you tense, but giving you clear objectives what to do next. And the weird thing is that with Kitchen Rush, I felt under pressure. I felt I need to do this. I need to reach this. And with A Tale of Pirates, I didn't. And I'm not entirely sure if that is because A Tale of Pirates is easier from the difficulty level is just, lower, or if there's something about the design that doesn't quite feed into it. And I think we can talk about this in the design section.
All right, so how about this? You take a tenuous grasp of reality, a lot of condescension, at least 4 cups, and a slow-wittedness masked through pretensions of prolixity.
Well, that's you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's design.
All right, so we've mentioned it, and I think I want you to help me here.
Okay.
Because you've played Kitchen Rush and I haven't. And the first thing you said to me was that Kitchen Rush is inherently more tense, inherently more enjoyable, feels more like a real-time game. Can you try and unpack for me that when you resolve your actions in relation to the egg timer conundrum here, what does doing it as soon as you place it as opposed to doing it after the sand run out, how does that change the game?
There are 2 things. One, there's the delayed satisfaction, the delayed satisfaction of you're forced to wait before you can resolve something you want to do. Basically, you're focused on doing. Well, so you focus when you place it and you resolve it immediately. You're focused on doing it now. You're done. You feel like you've achieved something, and then you're planning ahead as the sand timer runs out. With A Tale of Pirates, it's the other way around. You've decided what you want to do, you put it down, and you then for a second you think about what to do next, but then immediately you're stuck in this, all right, I'll do this now, and then I'll load the cannons, and next turn, since somebody else is going to shoot, I'm going to steer the ship. So you make this decision, and then you wait. Then you wait some more. And you might go, right, after I've steered the ship, I'll do something else. I mean, you have 30 seconds. 30 seconds doesn't sound like much, but it is quite a lot if you're really paying attention, thinking about things. So basically you can map out your next 3 or 4 turns, basically. Every time you get this artificial stumbling block into, now wait, and do nothing. Because you can't do anything. You can't move your send timer. You can't do anything. Everybody else is going through the same thing. They've plotted out or they've talked about the next 2 or 3 steps, and they're waiting for the game to catch up to them thinking about it. And this leads to this, and oddly enough, I mean, maybe other groups are different, but in our group and in my personal experience, this did not make the game more tense. It just made it feel like a slog.
It felt to me that you would be given very, very small amounts of activity followed by large expanses of inactivity.
Yeah.
And that's not interesting.
Exactly, because there's also no change in there. You also only have 1 send timer, which makes it more manageable. But if you have 2 send timers, like in Kitchen Rush, and I swear this is the last time I mention this game.
Well, I think it's absolutely relevant.
You split sort of.
You have 2 games coming out at the same time that has a very similar, if not the same, and certainly comparable core mechanic. I don't think there's any problem mentioning it.
Yeah, I mean, there you have 2 send timers, and you really, you're splitting your thoughts. All right, I'm going to this and this, that. And you're always sort of switching back and forth between the 2 send timers. And then again, this makes it challenging and interesting and exciting. And you can choose to only use one for strategic reasons. And in The Tale of Pirates, you have 1 character. You have these actions. And this is another thing that's very strange. Not very strange, but another thing that I think where the design could have been tighter, in that the individual actions are not sufficiently interconnected. Basically, one action ties to only one other action. Basically, loading the cannons only affects the cannons. Setting the sail, basically, it allows you to move around, and so you have these secondary actions that follow from there, but one is not necessary for the other. So once you've set your sails on a certain level, you can steer around as much as you want until you want to speed up or slow down, depending on what the objective tells you to do. And because of this, you basically have 2, at most 3 line of action tracks that you're thinking of. Basically, I do action 1, action 2, and action 3. And you have no branching there. And the only thing that happens is like, to make this more efficient, I'm not going to wait to do action 2. I'm going to start doing action 1. And 4 seconds later, you put your place in your send time into action 2, and we can speed it up.
I mean, I have an issue with the decision space in this game being so small. And
Right.
what I mean by that is it's so clear what the right move is. It's so clear at every point what the right move is. There's never any jeopardy. I never found at any point any jeopardy. I never felt at any point I could take this decision and that has these advantages, and I could take this decision that has these advantages, and it's a real sort of Sophie's choice as to which decision I make. There was never any of that. It's clear I go here now. And it's clear I go here. That decision is made within half a second. And now I've got to wait for 30 seconds sitting around doing nothing, talking to you about Donald Bloody Trump. And that's dull. I'm sorry. It's dull.
I think the thing is that you do have occasionally have these decisions to make. But you can usually make them during a time when there's no pressure on you. If all the send timers are not run out yet, you have time to think about, right, should I do this action or will you do this action, or will we play it with 3 players? So who of us is going to set the sail? Who of us is going to steer? All right. And then it doesn't take 30 seconds to come to a decision.
There's very little. We were talking about this yesterday when playing it. Sort of the great thing about Pandemic is most of the game is that push and pull of who does what and where do you go and what should you do on your turn and how you should sync up and be in the same location or in different locations and all of this. Taylor Pirate, you going to do the steering? Yeah, good. I'll do the thingy. Good. Done. 2 seconds, done. And then because of the constraint of the egg timer, you then have these acres of space in which you've got nothing else to think about.
Yeah, and
It's
that's
too. And you said to me you don't really judge a co-op game on its difficulty.
right.
I do. I think there should be an element of challenge. But even then, I think there should be decisions to be made. And here it just felt there's almost no decisions to be made. And what that ends up in is dull.
I think what's strange is that one easy fix to make decisions a little more interesting is by giving the characters abilities. Like if one character can also do a certain other thing. I mean, you sort of have a facsimile later on. I'm not going to spoil it, but you have ways of giving characters one-time actions during the game. You have to earn them. So you have to spend 1 centimer to earn this individual action. So that makes you more, but again, these are actions you can spend at any time. You can trigger at any time. So there's really no discernible difference between me steering the ship or you steering the ship. There's no discernible difference between one of us shooting or the other one. That nothing changes. We're basically absolutely interchangeable. And what it does is it does put us all in the same playing field, but it also means that there's no real, the decision is never who gets to do a certain
It's
thing.
like, oh my God.
Just when.
It's, oh no, because we don't have enough time. The cannoneer has got to leave the cannons for 2 minutes and go and steer the ship. And he's not great at steering the ship. He's great at steering the cannons, but we're so stretched thin that has to happen. That would be great.
Yeah.
There's none of that.
No. That's, I think that seems like a missed opportunity. But again, I am not a published game designer, so.
That's true. But I mean, there's an obvious desire to go simple with this game. Mm-hmm. And simplicity is fine, but simplicity that promotes interesting decisions is where you want to go. The simplicity in here hinders interesting decisions. I mean, I would go so far as to say it's rare that there is an interesting decision to be made. And then the structure of the missions mean that you're essentially doing the same thing, turning the ship to reveal cards, to shoot them or run away. And that is, and later on they introduce other things, but by that point, and unfortunately, so you said that the first mission is an intro mission, and that's great.
It works well, I think. It does its job very well.
But there's no ramping up after that.
Yeah.
The subsequent missions, and we've played, did we play 4 or 5 missions? They don't feel any more challenging. They don't feel any more satisfying. They all have this singular level. There's no ramping up. And so by the 3rd mission, I don't want to go to the 4th mission. Mm-hmm. And, sort of a professional obligation we sort of went through. But it gets to a point where you just say, if you haven't got me by this point, you haven't got me. And I don't think that Tale of Pirates grabs you.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I think, the missions we did play and we did see introduced new elements, introduced new ideas, but a lot of them, they didn't feel fundamentally different. It didn't feel like, over the overall 10 chapters, yes, you do. There is a storyline there. You sort of follow these characters, but again, they're interchangeable, so they don't feel unique. To go back to the topic of this week's episode, you don't feel like you invested in this particular character. I mean, there were times where I accidentally grabbed the wrong centimer because it didn't matter if I was red or blue or green. And that basically led to this, leads to this idea that yes, you unlock certain things, you have like a bit more story to read and things change, but I lacked the investment to care about these changes.
With narrative games, right? There has to be some identification with the characters you're playing.
Right.
And that's, as we were talking about earlier, it's not the war that's the engaging thing. It's what happens to the people you care about within the war that grabs you. And there's nothing to grab onto narratively, and unfortunately, nothing to grab onto mechanically either.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the fact that if you like the activity, if you think you have people who... I mean, I have met someone who loves A Tale of Pirates, who's head over heels with it. He far prefers it to that other game I was not going to mention again. And he did tell me that he loves the theme. He loves, the debate. He loves, making decisions. And sometimes it's fun. I'm having this experience with Pandemic Season 2 in that we just finished a session that was really easy. And while I don't necessarily want the entire game to be this easy, occasionally it feels nice to play a game that's usually challenging and you just ace it. It's great. And maybe A Tale of Pirates is that for him. Maybe this is a cooperative game that doesn't really completely screw him over challenge-wise. And if you feel like most of these real-time challenging games, co-op games are too stressful for me, they ask too much of me and I don't enjoy myself, I think A Tale of Pirates is different enough. But as somebody who does love the challenge, who does love the stress, who does love being under pressure, but finding a shared, coming to a decision in a group, this is something I enjoy. A Tale of Pirates doesn't give me that.
Playing this made me want to play.
Hi then, Georgie. What did this make you want to play?
It made me want to play another game about timed decisions. I have to, with a caveat though, I am not as in love with this game that I'm going to mention as with most other games I mentioned in this segment. I think it's fine. I think it's interesting. It makes me want to play to compare and contrast it to A Tale of Pirates. It's there's much more time pressure there. The decisions are much more complicated. You spend far more time coordinating. I mean, the core of the game is really coordinating your actions that you are programming in front of you to deal with all kind of random stuff being thrown at you. It's absurdly challenging, ridiculously challenging. And that game is Space Alert. You're a crew as well. You're also interchangeable, to be fair. So it's not like I'm far more invested there, but the challenge is higher. The decision you have to make, actually planning ahead, is far more engaging. You have this, hand of cards that you can use to move left or right or up and down or activate or whatever. Fairly simple, but you need to plan ahead a certain number of steps. You need to take into account what's going to happen on turn 2, 3, 4, whatever. And you do this while you coordinate with everybody else. This is the kind of high level, complex style game that I didn't want Tale of Pirates to be. I wanted it to be simple. I wanted it to be more approachable.
But it introduces complexity beautifully, I think, Space Alert.
Yes, by beating you over the head with it.
No, but I mean, mechanically, if you go through the missions in order, it's mechanically sort of quite simple, and then it just gets, but it does become it ramps up very quickly, and Tale of Pirates doesn't. No,
so far it didn't so much, no. And I want to play it because I would have liked A Tale of Pirates to be a simpler version of Space Alert. It isn't. It is an activity that quickly runs its course, and then it becomes something you do while you wait for the chance to open the next package.
For me, when we were playing Tale of Pirates, all I was thinking of is I want to play a great pirate game. And there's my top pirate game. I think it's just beautiful. Why never any expansions have been released for it blows my mind.
Do you need expansions?
I don't think you do, but I think at this point I've played it many, many times and it could be refreshed. But that's Libertalia. And Libertalia mechanically evokes a sort of pirate feeling. The fighter kicks off the highest ranked person from the boat. So you have this working class guy who's got a problem with those at the top, and he finally breaks and punches the captain in the face. Those sorts of things. And Libertalia is really tight and tense and interesting and fun. And everyone having the same cards encourages this wonderful double think. Will they, won't they? Have they, haven't they? There's memory aspects. There's reading people aspects. And then there's a wonderful interchange of mechanics that bounce off each other. And it's only the tangential connection that they're both pirate games. But I just found myself last night, and, this is what the section's called. This game made me want to play. And this game just made me think about Libertalia the whole time we were playing it.
Yeah, it's Paolo Mori, right?
Paolo Mori, yeah.
Yeah, I remember this game sort of, always felt like towards the end just completely goes off the rails, in the sense of it becomes utterly chaotic, which can be fun.
I didn't find that, but it's for the listener to decide.
Yes, clearly.
time, Georgios?
Yes. It's about 1.
Is a ruthless boss, Georgios?
No, it's about 1.
They make you clock in,
Oh no, it's 20 plus 2.
but they won't let you clock out until they're ready.
Who are they? Are you talking about yourself in the third person? Plural again.
Time, Georgios.
Who won't let you clock out?
They won't let me clock out, Georgios.
All right. Or you just build them for overtime then.
How can people get in contact with us?
They can use a number of our links on the show notes, but I'll happily read them out again.
Please do.
They can tweet at us on Twitter, either InfoPerfected or PerfectedInfo. They can look at our website, which is not a way to contact us, but you can look at the stuff. It's infoperfected.com. You can write us an email at infoperfected@gmail.com. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, and there's even Boardgame Geek, number 2348. Instagram and Facebook, of course. I'll probably just type in perfect information. I'm sure you'll find us.
Coming up in December,
Yes, what's coming up in December?
We
Is it
will-
Santa Claus? Oh, yes.
live every day,
Every day.
we will be opening a window of the Brettspiel Advent Calendar 2017, Georgios.
So you can live vicariously through the head-scratching amazement that you will feel if you own the real thing and open the doors on the morning of the very day they're supposed to be opened.
And I would like to give some spoilers, Georgios, but
Yes.
as we're doing it live every morning in December, I can't give you
Yes.
spoilers yet, Georgios, because it hasn't happened.
That is true. It has not happened, and we're doing it live, like Bill O'Reilly style. We're going to be yelling at each other and
Don't say that,
harassing
Georgios. Don't say
people.
that, Georgios. That was my Bill O'Reilly impression.
That's far too few cuss words.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
I'm going to get ready for a live broadcast of the calendar now.